the daughter who stole my life. My name is Lora. For 65 years, I believed that the walls of my home were built on a foundation of love, sacrifice, and family. I spent my youth working 2 jobs to ensure my daughter, Sarah, never knew the sting of want. I gave her the best education, a beautiful wedding, and eventually a place for her and her husband, Mark, to stay when they faced financial troubles. I thought I was being a supportive mother. I didn't realize I was inviting wolves into my sanctuary. The beginning of the end, it started with small suggestions. Mark would mention how difficult it was for me to manage the repairs on such a large estate. Sarah would hug me and whisper how much she worried about my health. "Mom," she said one evening over tea, her eyes shining with a sweetness that I now recognize as poison, "why don't you sign the management papers over to us? It's just paperwork. It will make it easier for us to take care of the taxes and the upkeep while you just relax." I trusted her. She was my flesh and blood. I signed the documents, believing I was securing my future. In reality, I was signing my own eviction notice. The betrayal, the atmosphere in the house changed overnight. The warmth was replaced by a cold, clinical silence. Mark began moving my belongings into the small guest room without asking. When I protested, he didn't apologize. He simply looked at me with a blank expression and said, "It's more practical this way, Lora." The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday. I walked into the living room to find Sarah and Mark sitting with a lawyer. "What is going on?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. Sarah didn't even look up from her phone. Mark stood up, his voice devoid of any emotion. "We've decided to sell the property, Lora. And since the title is now legally in our names, we've made arrangements for you. There's a lovely assisted living facility across the state. Your bags are already packed in the hallway." Cast out, I looked at my daughter, waiting for the joke to end, waiting for her to tell him he was wrong. Instead, she finally looked at me, and her eyes were as hard as flint. "You've had your time, Mom," she said coldly. "We need the capital to start our new business. You're just in the way now." They didn't even drive me there. They called a car service and watched from the porch as I carried 50 years of memories in 2 small suitcases. As the car pulled away, I looked back and saw Mark closing the heavy oak doors, my doors, and locking them. The silent vow, I stood on the sidewalk of a strange city, the rain soaking through my coat. I had no home, no money, and no daughter. They had stripped me of my past and stolen my future. But as I sat on a park bench, shivering, a spark of anger flickered in my chest. They took the house, they took the bank accounts, and they took the land. But they forgot one thing. They forgot that they learned their ambition from me, and I am not finished yet. My name is Lora, and while they think they have won, the story of my revenge is only just beginning. The first few weeks were a blur of cold corridors and thin blankets. The assisted living facility was a gray, lifeless place, a warehouse for the forgotten. Every night, I closed my eyes and saw Sarah's face, not the face of the little girl I used to tuck into bed, but the face of the woman who watched me leave in the rain without a single tear. They thought I was a broken old woman. They thought the management papers gave them everything. But Mark was greedy, and greed always leaves a trail of crumbs. The hidden key in the lining of my old leather suitcase, tucked behind a photograph of my own parents, was a small, rusted key. It wasn't to the front door of my house, nor was it to a jewelry box. It was the key to a safe deposit box I had opened 30 years ago at a small, independent bank in the valley. A bank Sarah didn't even know existed. Inside that box weren't just emergency funds. It held the original deed of the property and a private contract my late husband had made me sign. It stated that the house could never be sold or transferred without a specific, notarized certificate of family consent, signed by both the owner and a legal witness from his old firm. Mark and Sarah had used a forged digital signature to bypass the system. They hadn't stolen the house, they had committed fraud. The silent return I didn't call them. I didn't scream. I used the last of my hidden cash to hire a lawyer who didn't care about my age, only about the facts. We worked in the shadows for 3 months, while Sarah and Mark lived lavishly in my home, posting pictures of their new renovations on social media. They were hosting a grand garden party to celebrate the sale of the back lot to a developer, a sale that would have destroyed the beautiful woods my husband had planted. I chose that moment to arrive. The confrontation, I walked through the gates as the music played and the wine flowed. I wasn't wearing the ragged coat from the rainy night. I wore my best silk suit and held a manila envelope. "Mom," Sarah gasped, dropping her glass. It shattered on the marble patio. "What are you doing here? You can't be here. This is private property." Mark stepped forward, his face turning a dark shade of red. "I'll call the police, Lora. We told you to stay away." "Please, Mark," I said, my voice calm and steady as a heartbeat. "Call them. In fact, I've already invited them. They should be pulling into the driveway right about now." The sound of sirens cut through the party music. The price of betrayal. I handed the envelope to the lead officer. "Inside, you will find the original deed and the forensic report proving that the transfer of title was done through forgery and identity theft." The color drained from Sarah's face. She looked at Mark, but he was already backed against the wall, trying to distance himself from her. "The developer's check has already cleared, Mom," Sarah hissed, her voice trembling. "If you do this, we'll go to jail." I looked at the daughter I had loved so much. I looked at the house she had tried to sell for a quick profit. "You didn't care where I slept when it was raining, Sarah," I said softly. So I don't care where you sleep tonight, but I hear the county jail has very sturdy walls. A new chapter as the police led them away in handcuffs. The guests scattered like leaves in the wind. Silence returned to my home. I sat on the porch, watching the sun set over my land. The house felt empty, but for the first time in years, it felt clean. The silence of the house was no longer heavy. For the first few days after the arrests, I wandered through the rooms, touching the furniture and the walls. It felt as though the house itself was breathing a sigh of relief. The scent of Mark's expensive cigars and Sarah's cloying perfume slowly faded, replaced by the smell of fresh air and floor wax. I was back in my home, but the victory tasted like ash. My daughter was behind bars, and the realization of her hatred for me was a wound that wouldn't close. The legal storm winning back the house was only the first step. Mark had taken out a secondary loan against the property, using his forged documents. The bank was coming for their money, and they didn't care about my family drama. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Alina, sat across from me at the kitchen table. Lora, the fraud is proven, but the debt remains tied to the title for now. We can fight it, but it will take years. Or we can find another way. I looked out at the garden Sarah wanted to pave over. I'm not losing this house again, Alina. Not to them, and not to a bank. The unexpected ally, a week later, a man knocked on my door. It was Mr. Henderson, the developer who had almost bought the back lot from Mark. I expected him to be angry, but he looked humbled. Mrs. Lora, he said, tipping his hat. I heard what happened. I'm a father myself, and what those two did, it's a disgrace. I'm pulling out of the deal for the lot, but I have a proposal. He didn't want to build condos. He wanted to help me turn the backwoods into a community botanical trust. He offered to pay off the bank loan in exchange for a tax-exempt lease that would protect the land from development forever. I want it to be a sanctuary, I told him, a place for people who have nowhere else to go. The visit before the trial began, I went to the prison. I needed to see Sarah one last time, not as a victim, but as a mother seeking the truth. She looked small in her orange jumpsuit. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a bitter, frantic energy. Are you happy now? She spat, her hands trembling against the glass. You ruined my life, Mom. All for some old bricks and dirt. I didn't ruin your life, Sarah, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You traded your mother for a down payment. I just took back what was mine. I came to tell you that I've settled the debts. You won't owe the bank, but you will owe the state for what you did. I hate you, she hissed. I looked at her, and for the first time felt nothing. No anger, no pain, just a deep, hollow pity. I know, I said, and that is your burden to carry, not mine. The final foundation, I returned home and sat in my garden. The construction for the Botanical Trust had begun. Workers were planting flowers where Mark had planned to pour concrete. I realized then that my life wasn't over. I wasn't just old Laura, the woman who got kicked out. I was a survivor. I was a protector of the land. I took the framed photo of Sarah from the mantelpiece. I didn't smash it. I didn't burn it. I simply placed it face down in a box and carried it to the attic. Laura's legacy today. The gates of my estate are always open, not to developers or greedy relatives, but to the public. Children run through the woods, and elderly couples sit on the benches I installed. I have rewritten my will. The house and the land will never belong to a single person again. It will belong to the city, to be kept as a park in perpetuity. My name is Lora. I lost everything to a daughter I loved, but in the process, I found a strength I never knew I possessed. I am no longer waiting for someone to take care of me. I am the one who takes care of this world. And as I watch the sun dip below the horizon, I finally know what peace feels like. It feels like home. Thank you, like and subscribe my channel.